The massive crystal halls of Nexus Prime buzzed with quiet chatter as delegates from 12 different alien species settled into their floating seats. It was just another Tuesday for the Galactic Council, or at least what passed for Tuesday in this corner of space. Elder Vorthak, a tall creature with purple skin and tentacles for arms, straightened his fancy ceremonial robes and checked his notes one more time. Another primitive species from the outer rim, he muttered to himself, his voice carrying that bored tone of someone who had done this exact same thing hundreds of times before, probably still using chemical rockets and begging for scraps of our technology. The other council members seemed equally uninterested. Councillor Drextar, who looked like a giant insect with 4 glowing eyes, was already planning his lunch. The fish-like Zephyra delegates were literally sleeping in their water tanks. This was supposed to be humanity's big moment, their first official meeting with galactic civilization, but to the council it was just paperwork with extra steps. Everything changed in the span of 3 seconds. Space itself started to bend and twist outside the massive viewing windows. The Council's most advanced sensors, technology that could detect a pin drop from 3 star systems away, suddenly went haywire. Warning lights flashed red across every control panel in the station. "What in the 7 hells is happening?" shouted Councillor Drexatar, his 4 eyes now very much awake and very much concerned. The space around Nexus Prime folded in on itself like someone crumpling up a piece of paper, except the paper was reality, and someone had just rewritten the laws of physics. A sleek silver ship materialized out of absolutely nowhere, not through any jump gate or wormhole tunnel that the Council recognized, but through what looked like controlled manipulation of space-time itself. The entire chamber fell dead silent. 12 different species, some of whom had been exploring space for thousands of years, stared at this impossible arrival with their mouths hanging open. "That's not possible," whispered Elder Vorthak, his tentacles trembling slightly. "No one has mastered space-time folding. We've been trying to crack that technology for millennia." The human ship, which they would later learn was called New Dawn, hung in space like it belonged there. No dramatic entrance, no flashy lights, or impressive engine burns. It simply existed where it hadn't existed moments before, as if the universe had just casually decided to place it there. The airlock doors of the council chambers opened with a soft hiss, and 3 humans walked in like they owned the place. Not in an arrogant way, but with the quiet confidence of people who knew exactly what they were doing and weren't particularly impressed by the fancy crystal architecture or the floating chairs. The first human, a man in his 40s with sharp eyes and an understated uniform, stepped forward. This was Ambassador Lee Hyun, though the council didn't know his name yet. Behind him walked Commander Park Mina, a woman who looked like she could probably arm wrestle a space battleship and win, and Chief Engineer Kim Tae, a younger man whose casual expression suggested that bending reality was just part of his Tuesday. "Routine. Honored Council," Hyun said, his voice carrying clearly through the massive chamber without any need for amplification. His tone was polite, but not deferent, respectful, but not submissive. "We come as representatives of humanity, from the world you know as Sol 3. So far, so normal." This was exactly the kind of opening statement the council expected from new species. But then, Hyun said something that made every delegate in the room question whether they had heard correctly. "We are here not to request membership in your established hierarchy, but to seek recognition as equals among the stars." The chamber erupted. 12 different species began talking, shouting, chittering, and making whatever sounds they made when they were absolutely flabbergasted. In the entire history of the Galactic Council, spanning over 10,000 years and hundreds of first contacts, no species had ever opened with a statement like that. New species were supposed to be humble. They were supposed to beg for guidance, plead for technology transfers, and gratefully accept whatever scraps of knowledge the established civilizations felt like sharing. They were supposed to know their place at the bottom of the cosmic food chain and work their way up over centuries of proving themselves worthy. They were absolutely not supposed to walk in, and announced that they considered themselves equals to civilizations that had been exploring space since before their planet had developed complex life. Elder Vorthak raised one of his tentacles for silence, though it took several minutes for the chaos to die down. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a mix of curiosity and barely contained irritation. You speak of equality, humans of Sol 3. That is an interesting position for a species that has only recently achieved interstellar flight. Perhaps you would care to explain exactly what qualifies you to stand among civilizations that have mastered the cosmos for millennia. Ambassador Hune smiled, and somehow that simple expression made several council members very, very nervous. We would be delighted to show you. Councillor Drextar leaned forward in his floating chair, his four eyes glowing with what the humans would later learn was the alien equivalent of a smirk. He had been part of the Galactic Council for over 2 centuries, and he had seen this dance before. New species always talked big during first contact, claiming they had amazing technology or incredible achievements. Then reality hit them like a freight train. Very well, children of Sol 3, Drextar said, his voice dripping with condescension. Please, enlighten us about your remarkable civilization. Tell us about your single colony world and your primitive rocket ships. We're all very eager to hear about your 300 years of stumbling around your own solar system. The other council members chuckled in their various ways. Some made clicking sounds, others released puffs of gas that apparently passed for laughter in their species. Elder Vorthak's tentacles wiggled in what might have been amusement. They had all heard these grand claims before from newcomer species who thought they were special. Commander Parkmina stepped forward and activated a small device on her wrist. The air in the center of the chamber shimmered, and suddenly a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared, floating in perfect detail above their heads. But this wasn't just any map. This was a real-time display showing active human settlements complete with population data, resource flows, and communication networks. 23 star systems fully colonized, Parkmina said in a matter-of-fact tone, like she was reading off a grocery list. Population of roughly 400 million humans living permanently off-world, with another 2 billion rotating through various space installations and deep space exploration missions. The laughter died instantly. Every single council member stared at the holographic display with growing alarm. The map showed human settlements scattered across a region of space that would have taken most species 1,000 years to explore, let alone colonize. That's impossible, whispered Councillor Zephyra, her fish-like features pressed against the glass of her water tank. Our surveys show most of those systems are uninhabitable. The radiation levels alone should kill any carbon-based life form. Chief Engineer Kim Tae spoke up for the first time, his young face completely serious. We don't terraform planets to suit us. We adapt ourselves to suit the planets. Genetic modification, cybernetic enhancement, environmental suits that are basically second skins. When humans decide they want to live somewhere, we find a way to make it work. Elder Vorthak's tentacles had stopped wiggling. You're telling us you've modified your own species? Only volunteers, Parkmina replied, and only to expand our capabilities, never to replace what makes us human. The colonists on high-radiation worlds can process radiation like plants process sunlight. The deep space crews can hibernate for decades without aging. The asteroid, miners can survive in hard vacuum for hours if their suits fail. But the real shock was still coming. Kim Tae gestured to the display and the view zoomed out to show communication lines connecting every human settlement. Instantaneous quantum communication across all our colonies. No light speed delays. No signal degradation. A conversation between Earth and our furthest colony happens in real time. The chamber fell so quiet you could hear the hum of the life support systems. Instantaneous galactic communication was the holy grail of spacefaring civilizations. The Council's own communication network took hours or days to carry messages between systems, and that was considered state-of-the-art technology. Show us, demanded Drextar, though his voice had lost all its earlier arrogance. Parkmina nodded to Kim Tae, who tapped his wrist device. Colony Alpha 7, this is Kim Tae aboard Nexus Prime Station. Please respond. A woman's voice came through clearly, with no delay whatsoever. "This is Director Yoon Hai on Alpha 7. Good to hear from you, Tae. How's the diplomatic mission going?" "We're just getting started," Kim Tae replied, looking directly at the stunned council members. "I'll call you back in a few hours." "Copy that. Alpha 7 out." Elder Vorthak's tentacles were now trembling visibly. "That colony is 14,000 light-years from here. Even our fastest quantum relays would take 6 hours to reach that distance. Our quantum entanglement network operates outside normal space-time," Kim Tae explained casually. "Distance becomes irrelevant when you're working with paired particles that share the same quantum state regardless of physical separation." But Ambassador Hyun wasn't done yet. "The communication network is impressive, but it's not our greatest achievement." The holographic display changed again, now showing massive stellar engineering projects. Huge structures surrounded several stars looking like partially completed metal shells. "Dyson swarms," Hyun said simply. "We're not just harvesting solar energy, we're managing it, directing it, storing it in quantities that make traditional fusion reactors look like candles. 3 of our colonies are powered entirely by controlled stellar output." Counselor Zafira made a sound like a deflating balloon. "The energy crisis that has limited galactic expansion for 10 millennia, solved," Park Mina confirmed. "We don't just extract energy from stars, we can regulate their output, extend their lifespans, even restart dying stars under the right conditions. Energy scarcity is no longer a limiting factor for human civilization." The council members looked at each other with expressions of barely contained panic. What they were hearing wasn't just advanced technology. It was a complete paradigm shift that made their own civilizations look primitive by comparison. Kim Tae smiled politely. "Would you like us to continue, or do you need a moment to process this information?" Elder Vorthak's tentacles hung limp at his sides. In 300 years, humanity had achieved what the council thought was impossible. They hadn't just reached for the stars, they had grabbed them and made them work. The shock from humanity's technological revelations was still settling in when Elder Vorthak cleared his throat and consulted his ceremonial datapad. His tentacles moved with practiced efficiency, though they still trembled slightly from what he had just witnessed. "Very well," he said, trying to regain some sense of control over the proceedings. "We must now conduct the mandatory cultural assessment. This is standard protocol for all species seeking recognition by the Council." The other delegates nodded, grateful to move on to something that felt familiar and predictable. Cultural assessments were usually straightforward affairs. Most species had simple hierarchical structures, single planetary governments, and basic social systems that were easy to categorize and understand. "First question," Elder Vorthak announced, reading from his pad. "What is the structure of your planetary government? Who rules humanity?" Ambassador Hyun exchanged glances with his companions, and for the first time since their arrival, he looked genuinely amused. "That's a complicated question," he said with a slight smile. "No one rules. All of humanity." Before the council could react to this statement, the chamber's doors opened again and more humans entered. These weren't military personnel or diplomats. They wore different uniforms, carried different insignia, and spoke with different accents as they greeted the original 3 humans. "Sorry we're late," said a woman with short black hair and a confident stride. "I'm Delegate Choi Jun from the Luna Colonial Administration. Our transport got delayed by a solar storm." Another human, this one a man with weathered hands and clothes that looked designed for zero-gravity work, stepped forward. "Yoon Hae, representing the Centauri Settlement Alliance. Pleasure to meet you all." A third newcomer, a woman who moved with the careful precision of someone used to low-gravity environments, joined them. "Song Min from the Asteroid Mining Collectives. Thank you for including us in these talks." Elder Vorthak's tentacles waved in confusion. "I don't understand. Are you not all from the same government?" Choi Jun laughed, a sound that seemed to puzzle several of the alien delegates. "Earth has 47 independent nations, each with their own government, laws, and cultural traditions. Luna has 6 separate colonial administrations. The asteroid belt miners operate as independent collectives. The deep space stations are mostly corporate-sponsored research facilities with their own charters. But, Counselor Drexitar interjected, his four eyes blinking rapidly, how do you coordinate your space program? Your military? Your colonization efforts? We talk to each other, Yunhai said simply. When we want to do something big, like colonize a new star system or build a Dyson swarm, we hold conferences. Everyone who's interested sends representatives. We debate, we argue, we compromise, and eventually we figure out a plan that works for most people. The council members looked at each other with barely concealed alarm. This was not how civilizations were supposed to work. Every species they had ever encountered had eventually developed some form of unified planetary government before achieving interstellar travel. Unity through conquest, federation, or gradual cultural absorption was considered a necessary step in civilization development. You mean you have no central authority? Elder Vorthak asked, his voice rising slightly. No emperor, no parliament, no governing AI, no hive mind? Songmin shook her head. Nope, never needed one. Humans are pretty good at cooperating when we need to, and we're even better at respecting each other's differences. To demonstrate their point, the human delegates began speaking to each other in different languages. Choi-jun spoke in rapid Korean to Song-min, who responded in what sounded like a mixture of Mandarin and something else entirely. Yunhai addressed Ambassador Hyun in what the council's translators identified as Arabic, mixed with something their systems couldn't recognize. We've preserved over 200 Earth languages during our expansion into space, explained Ambassador Hyun. But we've also created about 50 new ones. Each colony world develops its own dialect, slang, and sometimes entirely new languages based on their unique experiences and environments. The asteroid miners speak a language that's half English, half mathematical equations, Songmin added with a grin. Try having a conversation about orbital mechanics in pure mathematics sometime. It's actually pretty efficient once you get used to it. Counselor Zafira pressed her face against her water tank. But how do you maintain social order? How do you prevent chaos and conflict? We do have conflicts, Yunhai admitted. The Mars terraforming project led to a 3-year debate between the atmospheric engineers and the ecosystem biologists. The asteroid mining rights caused a huge argument between the belt collectives and the inner system corporations. How did you resolve these conflicts? Asked Elder Vorthak. We talked about them, Choi-jun said. A lot. We held conferences, brought in experts, listened to different viewpoints, and eventually found solutions that worked for everyone. The Mars project ended up being a collaboration between both groups, and it's working better than either side originally planned. And the mining rights? We created a rotating system where different groups get access to different asteroid fields on a scheduled basis, Song-min explained. Plus, we established shared research stations where everyone can work together on new extraction technologies. The council members were struggling to process this information. Cooperation without domination was a concept so foreign to their experience that they had trouble even understanding how it could function. But surely you must have wars, Counselor Drexitar insisted. Competition for resources, territorial, disputes, ideological conflicts. The humans exchanged looks and several of them actually chuckled. Oh, we used to, Ambassador Hyun said. Earth's history is full of wars and conflicts, but something interesting happened when we started expanding into space. When you have unlimited resources and infinite room to grow, most of the traditional reasons for fighting disappear. Plus, added Choi-jun, it's hard to stay mad at someone when you might need their help to survive a solar flare or repair a life support system. Space has a way of putting things in perspective. Elder Vorthak set down his datapad with shaking tentacles. Every answer the humans gave challenged fundamental assumptions about how intelligent civilizations developed and maintained themselves. This is unprecedented, he whispered. Song-min smiled. We get that a lot. The tension in the chamber was thick enough to cut with a knife. After hearing humanity's impossible claims about their technology and their bizarre cooperative civilization, several council members were starting to look genuinely angry. Counselor Zafira's fins were fluttering rapidly in her water tank, which was apparently how her species showed agitation. Counselor Drexitar's 4 eyes were glowing brighter than they had all day. Enough of this nonsense, Drexitar finally snapped, his insect-like voice rising to a harsh buzz. You walk in here with your wild stories about stellar engineering and instant communication, claiming achievements that our greatest scientists say are impossible. We demand proof. Elder Vorthak nodded gravely, his tentacles moving in what looked like formal agreement. The Council requires demonstration of your claimed capabilities. We will not be fooled by holographic displays and clever presentations. Ambassador, Hyun remained perfectly calm, as if he had been expecting this exact reaction. Of course, Counselor. What would you like us to demonstrate first? Drextar's mandibles clicked together as he gestured toward the massive viewing screen that dominated one wall of the chamber. The screen flickered to life, showing a twisted mass of metal drifting in the darkness of space about 1,000 kilometers from Nexus Prime Station. That, he said with obvious satisfaction, is Research Station Keth Mori. It was abandoned 67 years ago after a catastrophic reactor failure. The radiation levels inside are lethal to all known life forms. The metal has been corroded by exotic particles to the point where our best engineers declared it unsalvageable. If your technology is so advanced, fix it. The other council members murmured their agreement. They had chosen well. Keth Mori was a graveyard, a twisted monument to the limitations of even advanced galactic technology. No species had ever successfully repaired damage of that magnitude. Chief Engineer Kim Tae stepped forward and examined the image on the screen. He tilted his head slightly, the way someone might look at a moderately challenging crossword puzzle. Quantum, decay cascade with exotic particle contamination, he said thoughtfully. Probably started in the main reactor core and spread through the station's superstructure. The metal looks like it's been converted into an unstable isotope. He turned to his colleagues. What do you think, 3 hours? Engineer Bae-Soo, a woman who had entered with the second group of humans, nodded. Maybe 4 if the damage goes deeper than it looks. We'll need to bring the matter reconstructor. I'll prep the quantum field generators, added Technician O.J., a young man who looked like he was barely out of school. The council members watched in stunned silence as these 3 humans discussed the impossible repair job like they were planning to change a light bulb. You're serious, Elder Vorthak said, his voice barely above a whisper. Dead serious, Kim Tae replied. He activated his wrist device and spoke into it. New Dawn, this is Kim Tae. We need a work shuttle prepped with quantum reconstruction equipment. We're going to fix that dead station. Within minutes, a small craft detached from the human ship and glided toward the twisted wreckage of Keth Mori. The council watched on the main screen as the shuttle docked with what remained of the station's airlock. Now we wait, Kim Tae said, settling into a chair that materialized from nowhere. The other humans seemed to have similar chairs, suggesting their technology could manipulate matter at will. Wait for what? Demanded Counselor Drextar. For them to finish. Park Mina replied casually. Want some coffee while we wait? Our food synthesizers make excellent coffee. Before anyone could answer, cups of steaming brown liquid appeared in the air near each council member. The smell was pleasant, but the casual display of matter creation, technology was deeply unsettling. 2 hours later, lights began flickering on throughout the dead station. Systems that had been dark for over 60 years hummed back to life. The twisted metal began to straighten, the corrosion disappeared, and the exotic radiation readings dropped to normal levels. Quantum matter reconstruction, Kim Tae explained, as the council stared in shock. We read the quantum signature of the original materials and restore them to their pre-damaged state. It's like having a perfect blueprint written into the atoms themselves. Impossible, whispered Counselor Zafira. Not impossible, corrected OJ's voice over the comm system. Just requires understanding matter at the subatomic level. We're done here, by the way. Station is fully operational and ready for immediate occupancy. But the humans weren't finished. As the council was still processing what they had witnessed, Dr. C.O.N. approached the Zephyrian delegation with a small medical scanner. Counselor Zafira, she said politely. I noticed in your earlier statements that your people suffer from a genetic plague that has resisted treatment for centuries. Would you mind if I took a quick look at the medical data? The fish-like alien was too stunned to refuse. She transmitted her people's medical records to the human doctor, expecting nothing more than polite sympathy. 3 hours later, Dr. Con presented a complete genetic therapy treatment. The plague organism is actually a modified version of your own cellular regeneration system, she explained. Someone or something weaponized your natural healing process centuries ago. This treatment will restore the original genetic sequence and provide permanent immunity. Counselor Zafira's fins stopped moving entirely. Our greatest medical minds have worked on this problem for 800 years. Sometimes you need fresh eyes, Dr. Con replied with a gentle smile. But the final blow to the council's composure came from Dr. Kang Yul, humanity's chief physicist. He had been quietly observing the chamber's advanced systems, and now he cleared his throat politely. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Elder Vorthak. "I don't mean to be rude, but I couldn't help noticing some issues with your dimensional physics calculations. The equations you're using for your faster-than-light travel contain 3 fundamental errors." Elder Vorthak's tentacles went rigid. Those equations were developed by the greatest minds in galactic history over thousands of years. "I'm sure they were brilliant for their time," Dr. Kang Yul said diplomatically. "But quantum mechanics has evolved quite a bit since then. Would you like me to show you the corrections? Your ships could probably achieve twice their current speed, with better fuel efficiency." The silence that followed was deafening. In the span of one afternoon, humanity had repaired the irreparable, cured the incurable, and casually corrected scientific principles that had stood for millennia. Elder Vorthak looked around the chamber at his fellow council members, seeing his own shock reflected in their various alien features. "What else can you do?" he asked weakly. Ambassador Hyun smiled. "Would you like to see our artificial intelligence partners, or should we start with the time dilation experiments?" Several council members made sounds that suggested they might be having some kind of breakdown. The emergency session had been running for 3 straight days, and the crystal halls of Nexus Prime had never seen anything like it. Council members who hadn't spoken to each other in decades were huddled in intense conversations. Ancient rivals were forming temporary alliances. Some delegates had barricaded themselves in their quarters, refusing to come out until someone could explain how the universe had suddenly stopped making sense. Elder Vorthak looked like he had aged a century in the past week. His usually pristine ceremonial robes were wrinkled, his tentacles hung limply at his sides, and he kept staring at reports that told him things he couldn't bring himself to believe. Every piece of data confirmed what the humans had demonstrated. Their technology wasn't just advanced, it represented a completely different approach to science that made the Council's greatest achievements look like stone tools. Counselor Drexitar was pacing back and forth in his section of the chamber, his 4 eyes darting between his fellow council members and the human delegates who sat patiently in their corner, looking like they were waiting for a delayed flight at a spaceport. "This changes everything," Drexitar buzzed anxiously. "Everything we thought we knew about the limits of technology, about the natural progression of civilizations, about our place in the cosmic order. It's all wrong." Some council members wanted to contain humanity immediately. The hegemony delegation had proposed surrounding Earth with monitoring stations and limiting human expansion until they could properly assess the threat level. The militaristic Torvak Empire had gone even further, suggesting that humanity's rapid advancement might represent some kind of dangerous anomaly that could destabilize galactic civilization. But other species were taking a very different approach. The scholarly Velkari had already submitted formal requests for technological exchanges and joint research programs. The trade-focused Nexari were practically salivating at the thought of economic partnerships with a species that had solved energy scarcity. 3 different civilizations had quietly reached out to Ambassador Hyun with offers of exclusive alliance deals. "We need to make a decision," Elder Vorthak announced to the chamber. "We cannot continue these emergency sessions indefinitely." Counselor Zafira, who had been unusually quiet since Dr. Con had cured her people's ancient plague, finally spoke up. "What decision is there to make?" They've proven their capabilities beyond any doubt. The question isn't whether they belong among advanced civilizations. It's whether we still qualify for that category ourselves. Her words hit the chamber like a physical blow. For the first time in the Council's 10,000-year history, established galactic powers were questioning their own technological and cultural superiority. Ambassador Hyun chose that moment to stand up, and somehow his simple movement commanded everyone's attention. The chamber fell silent as he walked to the center of the floor, his expression calm but serious. "Honored Council," he began, "we've been patient while you've debated our fate, because we understand this is difficult for you. Your entire worldview has been challenged in the span of a few days. But I think it's time we clarified something important." He gestured to his fellow humans, who joined him in the center of the chamber. "We didn't come here seeking your approval, or permission to exist as we are. We came here seeking recognition as equals so we could work together as partners. Whether you grant that recognition or not doesn't change who we are or what we're capable of." Commander Park Mina stepped forward. "We've already established diplomatic relations with 17 species outside the Council's jurisdiction. The Fringe Worlds Alliance has invited us to become founding members of their new confederation. 2 independent star nations have proposed mutual defense treaties. The question," Chief Engineer Kim Tae added gently, "isn't whether you'll accept us. It's whether you want to be part of what comes next, or if you'd prefer to maintain your isolation." This was not how first contact was supposed to work. New species were supposed to be grateful for any acknowledgement from established powers. They were supposed to beg for membership and technology transfers. They absolutely were not supposed to arrive with options and alternatives already lined up. Elder Vorthak's tentacles trembled as he processed the implications. "What exactly are you proposing?" Ambassador Hyun activated a holographic display that showed star charts extending far beyond the Council's traditional sphere of influence. "We're proposing a new model of galactic civilization. Not a hierarchy where some species rule over others, but a true cooperative network where every civilization contributes according to their strengths. We share our energy technology. You share your experience and governance. We provide our medical advances. You offer your cultural wisdom. We contribute our exploration capabilities. You add your historical knowledge." Dr. Seo-in stepped forward. "We've already begun joint research projects with 12 different species. The results have been remarkable. When you combine human innovation with alien expertise, you get solutions that neither side could have developed alone." Song Min from the Asteroid Mining Collectives added, 3 species have already adapted our quantum communication technology to their existing networks. In return, they've shared metallurgy techniques that have improved our mining efficiency by 40%. The Council members were starting to realize that humanity hadn't come to join their established order. They had come to invite the Council to join something entirely new. Councillor Drextar stopped pacing. "You're asking us to abandon thousands of years of established protocol." "We're asking you to evolve," Ambassador Hyun replied simply. "The same way you've evolved technologically over the millennia. Social and political systems can evolve too." The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone had expected. 7 species voted to grant humanity full recognition and a founding seat on the Council. 4 voted against, 1 abstained. But the real shock came when 3 of the established Council races announced they were leaving to join humanity's new cooperative network instead. As the session finally adjourned, Elder Vorthak approached Ambassador Hyun with something that might have been respect in his ancient eyes. "What happens now?" he asked. Hyun looked out at the viewing screen where human ships were already preparing to depart with mixed crews of humans and aliens aboard. "Now we explore the galaxy together," he said. "All of us, as equals." The human ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying representatives from 6 different species toward unexplored regions of space. Behind them, the traditional Galactic Council began the long process of figuring out how to adapt to a universe where they were no longer the most advanced civilization around. The age of human-led galactic exploration had begun, and the cosmos would never be the same.